They used me and ignored me, but you won't believe how I changed my life. I always felt like I was living in the shadow of a life that wasn't mine. From a young age, my responsibilities were greater than my age could bear. Caring for my 4 siblings, organizing the house, and ensuring everyone had the bare minimum of comfort became the routine imposed by my parents, Emmanuel and Laura. I tried to find moments for myself, but they were rare and quickly interrupted by incessant demands. I remember sleepless nights, rocking my younger siblings while I tried to study for school exams. The feeling of invisibility was constant. I existed only to serve, without recognition, without genuine affection. And deep down, I felt a mixture of anger and sadness for not being able to be the ordinary teenager I saw in others. It felt like my life was permanently blocked, and my own voice had no space to speak. This was the reality I knew, and for a long time, I believed there was no other way to exist. My name is Julia, and this phase of my life happened when I was about 16. I was still attending public school, but I also worked at a small coffee shop to save money and feel some sense of independence. Back then, simply wanting to study at night without interruptions seemed like a forbidden luxury. My mornings were consumed by household chores, my afternoons by school, and my evenings by work. I felt that every step I took toward independence was met with hostility from my parents. There was always a sharp comment or unfair demand that reminded me, "You're still ours, Julia. There's no room for you to grow alone." Despite this, my desire to conquer my own life grew, and each small victory at work or school gave me a spark of hope, even amidst the exhaustion and feelings of invisibility. The conflict with my parents began with small arguments about schedules, responsibilities, and dreams. I wanted to study a little more at night, and they insisted that my priority was taking care of the house and my siblings. Every attempt to talk about my personal goals was met with criticism and contempt. For the first time, I felt the weight of frustration, the feeling of being trapped in a seemingly endless cycle. Anxiety began to consume me, and every task I completed was accompanied by a feeling of helplessness. Gradually, I began to realize that my own will was constantly ignored, that my voice had no place in the home. This created a silent tension that weighed on my shoulders and made me question whether I would ever be able to break free from this suffocating pattern. The feeling of being alone, even surrounded by family, began to grow. One of the most painful moments of this phase was realizing that my siblings, although they loved me, were also being conditioned to depend completely on me. I felt an enormous weight of responsibility, almost as if it were my duty to ensure they didn't feel neglected by my parents. This burden made me feel fear and guilt, a combination that left me paralyzed for hours. I wondered if I would ever be seen for who I truly was, a teenager with dreams, talents, and a desire to live my own life. I often cried in secret, trying to drown my despair and anger in silence, so that no one would notice my fragility. This phase was marked by endless nights, silent tears, and a constant feeling of emotional abandonment, even though I was physically surrounded by my family. The situation began to intensify when I decided I needed more autonomy. I began organizing my time to study and work, creating a small space for myself amidst the chaos. But my parents reacted with unexpected aggression. Every achievement of mine was treated as a threat, and any display of independence generated harsh criticism. The tension at home became unbearable. Arguments erupted over trivial matters, and my efforts to survive emotionally seemed invisible. It was at that moment that I realized I needed to seek help outside of that environment. I felt fear, but also a growing determination. I was beginning to realize that my life could not be limited to serving others and being ignored. Something inside me told me it was time for a change, even if the path was painful and uncertain. The decision to move away from my parents' house wasn't made impulsively. It took months of reflection, sleepless nights, tears, and fear of the unknown. I knew that by seeking my own autonomy, I might face rejection, even harsher criticism, and the feeling of being completely alone in the world. But the idea of continuing that suffocating routine began to seem unbearable. Working at the coffee shop, studying, and caring for my siblings was already exhausting. Living in an environment where my voice wasn't valued was emotionally draining. It was during this period that I realized my emotional survival depended on a drastic change. I began to imagine alternatives, people who could support me, until the idea of reaching out to my maternal grandparents, Nusa and Ricardo, emerged. They had always been a source of affection and security. but I hesitated for fear of disappointing my parents or facing unexpected rejection. Each step toward the decision required courage, but it also reminded me that I had the right to exist as an individual, with my own dreams and desires. When I finally made the decision to go to my grandparents' house, I felt a mixture of fear and relief. My parents' reaction was exactly what I feared: hostility and, contempt. I was accused of ingratitude, of being disobedient, of not appreciating what they had done for me. Each word felt like a knife wound, but at the same time, it gave me clarity. I could no longer depend on their recognition to live my life. With Nusa and Ricardo's support, I found not only a safe place but also people who truly listened to me, valued me, and encouraged me. For the first time, I was able to experience the relief of not having to be responsible for everything and everyone at once. The welcoming environment gave me the strength to reorganize my thoughts, set concrete goals, and envision a future that was truly mine. The feeling of freedom was strange, but at the same time, liberating. For the first time, I felt I could build my own identity without being suffocated by neglect or manipulation. During my first few days at my grandparents' house, I faced intense internal conflict. It was hard to believe I had finally found a safe space. I felt guilty for leaving my siblings and feared my parents would never accept me again. But Nusa and Ricardo's loving presence gave me perspective. They showed me that pursuing my happiness didn't mean abandoning my family, just establishing healthy boundaries. Over time, I began to organize myself, setting study schedules, planning my savings, and pursuing academic opportunities. Every small achievement was celebrated, and the sense of progress gave me the strength to face the difficult days. For the first time, I felt like my life had its own direction and that my choices truly mattered. This change in environment showed me that the right support makes a difference, and that when surrounded by people who believe in you, even the impossible seems achievable. One of the most important moments during this period was when I met my English teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez. She recognized my academic potential and encouraged me to apply for scholarships, opportunities that had previously seemed distant and unattainable. Her support was a turning point. I finally had someone outside of my immediate family who believed in me, who saw my capabilities and challenged me to grow. With each encouragement, I felt a greater confidence in my own abilities. I began to realize that my life story didn't need to define my future. I could write new chapters according to my choices and efforts. The simple act of studying with focus, doing exercises, and participating in extracurricular activities made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. It was a slow but steady process. Each step, each challenge overcome, built not only my knowledge but also my self-esteem and the sense that I deserved to find my place in the world. At the same time, my friendships with Megan and Casey became a fundamental pillar of emotional support. They helped me cope with moments of insecurity, doubt, and longing for my family, showing me that even in difficult situations, we don't have to face everything alone. Talking to them about my dreams and fears made the rebuilding process easier. The exchange of experiences and mutual encouragement allowed me to realize that, despite adversity, it was possible to maintain hope. I began to see myself differently, no longer as a victim of circumstances, but as someone capable of making decisions, facing obstacles, and building a path of overcoming them. This support network, combined with the welcome from my maternal family and Mrs. Rodriguez's guidance, gave me the confidence to take the next steps, even when the challenges seemed insurmountable. Gradually, the feeling of helplessness was replaced by determination, and life began to take a clearer and more promising direction. Despite the welcoming atmosphere with my grandparents, homesickness and memories of my old home haunted me. Sometimes I found myself thinking about my siblings, feeling guilty for having moved away, even though I knew I was doing what was best for myself. The pain of separation was constant, and there were times when everything felt more than I could bear. I had to juggle work at the coffee shop, studies, household chores at my grandparents' house, and still deal with my confusing emotions. I felt overwhelmed, tired, and sometimes I considered giving up altogether. The nights seemed endless, and the fear of failure or not achieving my goals was suffocating. Anxiety consumed me, and I questioned my ability to move forward. Each obstacle seemed to grow in proportion, and the weight of responsibility on myself became almost unbearable. But there was something inside me, a spark of resilience, that reminded me why I had decided to change my life. It was a blend of hope, courage, and determination, even amidst doubt and discouragement. The academic challenges began to intensify. The tests, assignments, and the pressure to excel demanded an effort that, at times, seemed beyond my strength. Mrs. Rodriguez always told me I had potential, but the reality of fatigue and pressure made me question whether I could really do it. There were nights when I cried over books and notes, feeling the frustration of trying to juggle everything without making mistakes. However, every time I thought about giving up, I remembered my grandparents' confidence, my teachers' words of encouragement, and my friends' support. Gradually, I began to better organize my time, learn study techniques, and prioritize my tasks, but I still faced internal doubts and a constant fear of failure. It was a daily battle, an effort that required more than academic knowledge. It required emotional resilience and the inner strength to believe I could achieve my goals even in the face of such difficulty. At the same time, contact with my parents became tense and sporadic. Attempts at reconciliation arose, but each conversation felt like a test of patience and boundaries. They still held expectations that I should submit to their rules and accept the life they planned for me, with no room for my own choices. This conflict wore me down emotionally, and there were days when I felt torn between love and anger, between longing and the need for freedom. The pressure to prove I could follow my own path was immense. Every call or message from them made me reflect on who I truly was and who I wanted to become. It was a painful process of setting boundaries, learning to say no while maintaining respect and affection, without losing myself in trying to please everyone. The strength I found within myself began to solidify in this constant confrontation, demonstrating that my autonomy was not only desirable, but necessary for my own emotional survival. One of the most critical moments came when the opportunity arose to apply for a scholarship that could transform my academic life. However, the application process was intense and required complete dedication. For weeks, I woke up early to work, studied during the day, and spent hours at night filling out forms, writing essays, and preparing documents. The pressure was immense, and the fear of failure paralyzed me at times. I questioned whether all that effort would be worth it, whether I was capable of facing each challenge and proving to myself that I deserved this opportunity. The nights were long and lonely, and I often felt like giving up. But there was an insistent inner voice reminding me that each step taken was an achievement, however small, and that giving up would mean returning to a life of invisibility and imposed obligation. It was at that point that I realized that overcoming adversity isn't a single moment, but a sequence of choices, small decisions, and daily resilience in the face of adversity. My doubts and fears began to intensify, and there were times when I thought all my effort would be in vain. I remembered Megan and Casey's words, my conversations with Mrs. Rodriguez, and my grandparents' looks of pride. These thoughts were my foundation in the darkest days. I began to realize that, despite the fatigue and pressure, each challenge was an opportunity to prove my own strength. Despair nearly consumed me, but determination began to become a habit. Each task completed, each study completed, and each small step toward achieving my autonomy became personal victories. The feeling of being able to make my own decisions, even difficult ones, began to replace fear and insecurity. I realized that the turning point was happening silently, through the sum of small actions and conscious choices, and that my story could finally change course. When I finally received the news that I had won the scholarship, I felt a mixture of relief, joy, and disbelief. All the effort, every sleepless night, every doubt, and every tear seemed worth it. I remember calling my grandparents and hearing their voices filled with pride and emotion. In that moment, I realized that I was not only achieving an academic opportunity, but also reaffirming my ability to fight for myself. The feeling of validation was intense, but accompanied by a renewed responsibility. Now I had the chance to prove, especially to myself, that I could transform my life. Winning the scholarship didn't erase the traumas of the past, nor did it solve all the difficulties that would still arise, but it showed me that perseverance and determination have real power. From that point on, I began to see my future clearly, visualizing the steps I needed to take to continue growing, studying, and gaining independence. At the same time, I began rebuilding my relationship with my siblings. Even though we were away from my parents' house, we maintained constant contact, and I could see that they too benefited from my decision to pursue my own life. We began to talk more openly, sharing feelings and experiences. The feeling that I could still have a positive influence on their lives without carrying the full weight of responsibility was liberating. They became motivators and living reminders of why I was fighting, to show that it was possible to choose a different path, seek respect, and achieve my dreams, even when everything seemed to be against it. This connection strengthened my confidence and determination, allowing me to feel less guilty and more empowered, understanding that overcoming obstacles doesn't mean abandoning those we love, but learning to balance care and autonomy in a healthy way. Meanwhile, Megan and Casey's emotional support remained essential. Sharing my fears, insecurities, and achievements with them made each challenge lighter. Sometimes, a simple conversation or a gesture of encouragement was enough to renew my energy and remind me that I was not alone. I learned that seeking support is not a weakness, but rather a way to strengthen my resilience. At the same time, I began to approach problems more strategically. Planning, prioritizing, and making informed decisions became a constant practice. This approach not only helped me organize my academic life, but also prepared me to deal with the emotional and social challenges that arose. Gradually, the feelings of fear and insecurity gave way to confidence and determination, allowing me to see my achievements in a concrete way, even amidst persistent difficulties. A significant transformation also occurred in my relationship with my parents. Although the journey was slow and delicate, small signs of recognition and concern began to emerge. Laura, my mother, showed genuine concern at times, and Emmanuel gradually began to recognize my efforts. These changes didn't happen magically. They were the result of my firm stance and the intervention of Aunt Barbara, who helped mediate the dialogue and show my parents the mistakes they had made. I learned to balance compassion and firmness, recognizing that hostile people can evolve, but that my priority was my own life. This balance taught me valuable lessons about boundaries, forgiveness, and emotional resilience, showing me that overcoming also involves reconciliation and understanding, even when faced with those who have caused us pain. As time passed, my life began to reorganize itself in concrete ways. I studied diligently, developed professional skills at the coffee shop, achieved academic recognition, and built a solid and reliable support network. The feeling of being in control of my life was unprecedented and liberating. I finally saw myself as someone capable of transforming difficulties into opportunities, adversity into learning, and frustration into strength. I realized that the process of overcoming obstacles isn't about erasing the past or ignoring pain, but about using them as fuel to build something greater. A sense of personal pride and renewed confidence accompanied me daily, and for the first time, I felt that my future was in my hands, ready to be shaped by my determination and constant effort. With my routine finally organized and my academic achievements underway, I realized my life had truly transformed. The small daily victories, delivering excellent work, managing to save part of my salary, receiving sincere praise from teachers and friends, began to build a solid sense of self-esteem. Each step toward independence strengthened my confidence and my realization that I could truly be the protagonist of my own story. For the first time, I didn't need to depend on my parents' approval to validate my existence. Recognition came from people who truly cared, and above all, from myself. This sense of autonomy was liberating, and with it came the certainty that overcoming challenges isn't just about achieving external goals, but also about gaining the emotional freedom to decide who you want to be. My brothers remained a constant motivator, reminding me of the impact my choices could have. With every call, conversation, or visit, I realized I was contributing not only to my own journey, but also to inspiring those around me. The feeling that my actions mattered transformed my perspective. It wasn't just, about surviving or achieving an education, but about building a solid foundation of confidence, responsibility, and self-love. It was moving to realize that even in the face of a childhood marked by neglect and exploitation, it was possible to create new memories and relationships based on respect and support. This understanding reinforced my commitment to my own growth and the well-being of those I love. My relationship with my parents stabilized in a respectful way. I can't say all the problems disappeared, but there was a significant shift in the family dynamic. Emmanuel began to recognize my achievements, and Laura showed genuine concern, albeit still shyly. I learned that overcoming challenges doesn't require everyone to change immediately. Sometimes it's necessary to move forward firmly, establish clear boundaries, and, at the same time, cultivate empathy. This realization gave me emotional maturity, helping me deal with external expectations and stay focused on my goals. Today, I know it's possible to transform complex relationships without losing yourself in the process. Today, I share my story to inspire those who feel trapped or invisible, reminding them that even when all seems lost, it's possible to rewrite one's own path. I achieved my education, built solid relationships, and found a safe space to grow, learn, and dream. There are still parts of the pain that haunt me, but they don't define who I am or limit my choices. I've learned that overcoming challenges requires daily practice, conscious decision-making, and the courage to walk away from what harms us. My life today is proof that, with support, determination, and self-belief, we can transform obstacles into achievements, pain into learning, and frustration into strength. Each step of this journey reminds me that I deserve to be happy, that my voice matters, and that my story is mine to write, the way I've always dreamed.